All right, so I want to start with the verse. Sarah said it already, but I'm going to say it again. So it's Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. It's trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. All right, so tonight I want to tell you a story. And this story is the story of how I became a mommy. Not once, but twice. And I know that motherhood is not necessarily something that is super relevant to you guys right now at this point in your lives. But I think the story, or the story of how basically the Lord took me on a very, very long and windy journey to become a mom, when I didn't think it was going to be that complicated, is something that is relevant, right? Something that you guys can relate to in the fact that sometimes the Lord has different plans than you do, but he is good and he still delivers. So I'm going to start with the exposition, which, for those of you who are not language arts nerds like me, means the start or the setup of the story, okay? So I love kids. I've always loved kids. I was that girl who, I would go to my friends' houses in high school and stuff like that, and I would spend just as much, if not more time playing with their younger siblings than with them. I had a jillion babysitting jobs, I'm not kidding. What else? I was that person who would make random friends with kids everywhere I went. We'd be in a restaurant, some little kid would make eye contact with me, and I'd be like, hi, and then we'd be friends before the end of the night. All the time. I just loved kids. I always loved kids. And in college, my job was teaching gymnastics to little kids, and I loved it. And that's actually where I realized I wanted to be a teacher. And side note, my younger cousins will tell you that it was never a shock to them that I became a teacher, because they were like, you used to force us to play school all the time. And I was like, oh yeah. I hope it was good. But it took me actually a little while to discern teaching. I had a whole other degree aside from teaching, and then I got out of college and I was like, what am I going to do with this degree? And then the Lord kind of put it on my heart to be a teacher. So I went back to school to be a teacher. And I love teaching. I know some of my former students are in this classroom tonight, or classroom. See, I love teaching. Are in this room tonight. And I will never ever claim to be a faultless teacher. And there were many days that were very difficult and frustrating, but I loved it. I really loved it. And I taught middle school, so 7th and 8th grade. So when my husband and I, we got married, we decided we wanted to start a family, it never had crossed my mind that it would be difficult or that it would take a lot of time or anything like that. I always thought, oh yeah, I love kids, I'm going to be a mom. This is duh. You know what I mean? It just seemed perfectly natural. So when I'm sorry, turn on brain. It didn't take us too long to realize that something wasn't quite right. And so we went to a doctor, and he told us, try these vitamins, try these diet changes, and then, if things don't, if you don't get pregnant, come back and see me. So we're like, okay. So about a year later, we went back and we're like, I'm still not pregnant. And so we decided to start treatment for infertility. So, I'm not going to go into detail about what that entails. Hopefully, God willing, none of you ever have to experience that. But suffice to say, it's a lot of tests, it's a lot of waiting, it's a lot of trusting, it's a lot of frustration, it's a lot of disappointment, and it wasn't exactly the most enjoyable experience of my life. About a year into this process, I started getting a little nudge on my heart about adoption. And honestly, adoption was never anything I had thought about before. Not that I thought anything was wrong with it, it just didn't seem like something was in the plan for my life. But it kind of started something, knocking on my heart, especially in prayer. Whenever I would go into prayer and I would pray about, what was going on, that would kind of tap on my heart. And so my husband and I decided to start discerning adoption. So I don't know if anyone in this room is adopted. If you are, you're awesome. Or if you know somebody who's adopted. But the process is, it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of classes, you literally take classes, you do courses, you watch videos, you do essays, it's almost like taking a college class is kind of how it felt. Which I honestly enjoyed a lot of it. It was very interesting, like some of the stuff that we had to learn about. But I tell you all of this because at this point in my journey, it had been 3 years since I had decided that I wanted to start my family. And to go into it, to start the process of adoption was wonderful. It's what we wanted to do. But I also knew that it involved a lot more time and a lot more waiting. And I was going to say too that there's also this wonderful thing called a home study. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that, but they basically like interview you multiple times, and then they write up an essay of your life. Like, I'm not kidding. It's a little nerve-wracking. They come to your house, they see your house and everything. It's an interesting process, and then you read it. Reading it is weird. It's like reading a book of your own life because it talks about everything. But all of this was worth it to me, and I was like, I felt like this was what we were called to do, and so it was worth it. But it was still a lot of waiting, and it actually took us another full year to basically complete all of the adoption paperwork and everything to get ready. So this is like approximately 3-4 years at this point that I've been wanting to be a mommy, and it hasn't happened yet. Let's see where I'm at. Hold on. And I tell you all this too because waiting for something good is hard, right? It's kind of different where it's like, or something good or something natural, something that you feel like should happen easily, right? So it's different if, like, say you're waiting for the big test on Friday that you're like dreading, right? That's a different kind of waiting, right? But waiting for something like, I don't know, a college acceptance letter, or eventually to meet your future spouse, like these are things that are like good and exciting and you want, and you feel like it should be happening in your life, and to have to continue to wait is really, really hard, especially for something like, I want to be a mom. Like, it didn't seem like that much to ask, right? Like, I just wanted to be a mom, but the Lord was calling me to wait. And so every time, a friend of mine would announce that she was pregnant, I would be overjoyed for her, absolutely. But a little bit of my heart broke too, right? Because I was like, okay, here's another person who's getting this desire to be a mom, and I'm still here waiting. And it was frustrating. But we'll get more into what I think the Lord was teaching me about and all of this in a minute. But the Lord was teaching me a lot through all of this. And I just couldn't, I did a lot of questioning. So in January of 2019, we finished our profile, like, because they have you make a profile, which is another weird thing. It's like a self-advertising thing. Like, it literally feels like a commercial for you. You make like a book of your life and like all the things that you do and like pictures of you and everything like that. And they take that and they show it to potential birth moms, so that the birth mom can choose, you or another family for her child. Which it's another weird thing. It's cool, but it was weird. So anyways, we finished our profile and we were in the pool or waiting or whatever you want to call it. We were waiting for the call. So then on Thursday, February 21st, so this is only like a month after this, I was sitting in my classroom by myself. I was prepping for the next week's classes when I got a call from an unknown number. And at first, I almost, I thought it was spam, so I didn't answer it. But then I was like, well, maybe, just maybe, there's an off chance that this is maybe a caseworker from an adoption agency. So I answered the phone, and it was this woman, and she was calling me, and she said, we have this little baby boy. He was born last week, and he is waiting for his forever family. And so she said, are you interested? And I said, yes, but let me call my husband, because obviously I kind of need to make this decision with him. And before I hung up the phone with her, I said, I want to ask before I call my husband and call you back, are you going to call other families? Because it's kind of a typical procedure where a baby or a child will match with a couple of families usually. Like, they'll have a family when you're getting ready to adopt, you kind of actually fill out, what kind of child you would like to welcome into your home, and that kind of makes sense. If you want a boy or a girl, or how old you want them to be, all that kind of stuff. And so we had done that, and so typically a couple of families will match with any given child, if that makes sense, and they'll usually call all of them until one of them says, yes, we're ready to move forward and adopt this child. So even if you say, let me think about it for a couple days, they're going to call other people while you're thinking about it because they want to get this child to a home as soon as possible. So I just said, are you going to be calling other people? Because I didn't want to lose the opportunity. And what she said was, no, we believe that you are the best family for this child. We're not calling anyone else. And I'm trying not to cry. When I heard those words, it was like, I knew. I was like, this is my kid. Like, I don't know, something in me clicked and I knew. And I'm not going to lie to you, I hung up that phone and I sobbed like a baby. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I have my son, I have my child. Now, granted, nothing was guaranteed at this point, but I in my heart, I don't know, I just knew this was my kid. I don't know how, I don't know why, I just knew. And so we called her back and we said, yep, we're interested, let's go. And she said, okay, we'll meet you at the hospital tomorrow. You can come and meet him and start filling out paperwork. And so we did, and we brought him home Sunday. So let me just get that timeline for you. Thursday, I got the call. Sunday, I had a kid at my house. 3 days. I went from waiting 3 or 4 years to having a son in 3 days. And I don't know if there's any more powerful example of God's provision than that. And the Lord was super present that whole weekend. And I admit I felt his absence a lot in the years leading up to that because I just felt like, Lord, I just want this desire of my heart. Where are you? But during that weekend, he was there. I heard songs on the radio. I heard, we were driving home from the hospital and we were listening to the radio and this song, which was the first one, Good, Good Father, which is one of my favorite ones, came on, which of course made me cry. And then I remember saying in my head, I'm like, Lord, you know what I would love to hear right now is Reckless Love. And guess what came on the radio right after that? Reckless Love. And so I was like, I was a wreck. I was a wreck that whole weekend. It was great. But, so that, and then when it came to naming him, we didn't have a list of names. My husband refuses to have a list of names for our kids. He wants to let the Holy Spirit guide him, which I think is really cool. But part of me is like, I also want to have a list of names. But he picked up our son and held him in his arms, and he was like, his name is James. And I was like, yeah, it is. And that is his name. He is James. There is no denying that is who he is. And it was really cool. And that was my grandfather's name, who had passed away many years ago. So it was a very special family name. So that was another moment of the Lord, like just being really present. And just like calling people and telling them was the coolest part. Just, people crying, people like screaming, people being it was so cool just to be able to call people. And my grandma, my grandpa's name was James, her husband, when I told her his name, she was just like crying. It was amazing. So the Lord was very present, and I'm not going to lie to you, newborns are hard. Babies are hard. They're wonderful, and they're so cute, but they're hard. And there were a lot of sleepless nights. James was not a good sleeper. And it was kind of a shock, because sometimes, if you ever ask a pregnant lady, they have 9 months to kind of prepare to have a baby, and the last couple of months, you don't really sleep because you're huge, and you can't roll over without, causing an earthquake in your bed. I'm serious. That's how it feels. And you're achy, and there's just all sorts of stuff going on. But they get prepared a little bit in a way to have sleepless nights. But I went from sleeping blissfully to not sleeping in 3 days. And it was hard, but it was so good. It was so good. And James is such a joy. I know some of you may have met him before. He is such a hamburger. He is a joy. Really and truly. He may not be my biological child. I may not have given him any of my genetics, but he is my kid. Through and through. Sometimes my husband will point it out. He's like, you and him are so similar. Yeah, sorry. And actually I've had a couple people tell me that James actually has my smile, which I was like, oh, that's really sweet. But he does. He has my smile. And he has taught me so much, more than I could ever learn from any book, anywhere, any other adult. He's almost 4. 4-year-old has taught me so much. And he's just a huge blessing every day. So when James was about 2, we decided we wanted to add to our family again. And at this point in time, we kind of had basically assumed that we weren't going to have any biological children. So it had been like 3-4 years that we'd been in, until we adopted James, and then it'd been another 2 years. So it'd been 6 years, and we're like, it's okay. We were at peace with it, honestly. We felt like the Lord had kind of closed that door and opened up the door of adoption for us and just pointed us in that direction, and we were just going to adopt a bunch of kids. We're like, okay, that sounds great. He really led us here. I feel a lot of peace and joy about it. Awesome. So we started the process again. And it's not just like, oh, we want to adopt again. Like a lot of that paperwork I had to do the first time, we had to do again. And that's okay. It's worth it. So we started the process again. And at one point I was talking to one of the caseworkers, and she's like, I'm going to be honest with you. So this was after the pandemic, okay? Because this was like 2021 or 2020 or something like that. And she's like, we're not getting a lot of birth moms in right now because, people have been in isolation and people are, they're scared of getting sick. And so there's just not a lot of people coming into our adoption agency right now, wanting to place their children for adoption. And I remember having a moment of frustration again, thinking, oh my gosh, Jesus, I just want to be a mom. Like, I just want to have a couple kids. Like, I don't know why it felt like, why is this so much to ask? You know what I mean? But I was like, it's okay. The beautiful thing about adoption is that you don't know when you're going to get a kid, but you will get a kid. It'll happen eventually. So I was like, okay, just be patient, just trust. So that was early, I think that was early 2021. So December 2021, I woke up, December 15th, I remember very distinctly. I woke up from a very weird dream. And for whatever reason, I suddenly decided to take a pregnancy test. There was no rhyme or reason behind it. I'm serious. It was like literally I just woke up and I was like, I'm going to go take a pregnancy test. It was weird. And actually, I can tell you too, in my dream was a woman who had passed away a couple years ago, but was a very close family friend. And she had been trying to tell me something in my dream, and I couldn't figure out what she was telling me, but she was like very urgent about it. And so it was like I woke up from that dream, and I don't know why, but that was the thing I wanted to do, was take a pregnancy test. And so I went and took a pregnancy test. And I'll tell you, I've taken many pregnancy tests in my life, and all of them have been negative. So when I took this one, I honestly almost threw it away without even looking at it. I kind of glanced, I was like, okay. And then I was like, wait a second. And I took it back, and there was a very faint second pink line, and I was like, oh, what? What? Like, I was in shock, absolute utter shock. And there were a lot of emotions going on. I was excited, I was scared, I was happy, I was afraid, and I was confused. Because it kind of felt like the Lord had led me on this like long and windy road to get to adoption, and I really strongly had felt like He had closed the door to biological children and had just opened this door to adoption, and so I was like at peace with that, and all of a sudden it felt like we were doing a 180. But I was like, okay, but we're doing this, obviously, and I am so excited and so happy. But it was another instance of how the Lord laughs at our plans, because He does. And it's a loving laugh, but it's a laugh. And so as my pregnancy continued, that confusion faded, and I started to see that once again the Lord was teaching me to let go of what I had perceived my future to be like, and to trust Him in what was in the goodness of His plans for me. And being pregnant teaches you a lot about dying to self and learning to just really give of yourself in love, and that was a really beautiful and wonderful experience for me, and it was really powerful because I never expected it to happen. So each step of the journey was kind of like just something I never thought I'd get to experience. And side note, watching her grow up has been the same thing, because I never thought I'd be able to see what I looked like, as a baby, and see, and I'm excited to see who she turns out to be. I never thought that would happen. And the day she was born was one of the best days of my life, and I was in labor, and so it wasn't exactly comfortable. It wasn't the most painless day of my life, but it was honestly one of the most beautiful and powerful days of my life. And the Lord has given me, He kind of gives me senses about my children. I think sometimes I've been blessed with the gift of word of knowledge, where I kind of have an idea about things before they come to be. So for example, with James, I knew that long before he was born, I knew he was going to be a boy. I knew he was going to come between January and March. She was born in February. I knew what kind of adoption he was going to be. A friend of mine had actually prayed over me, and she said, I feel like his name is going to be John Michael, which wasn't quite right, but it was very close because his name is James Michael. So I had all these senses, and actually the same with her. We did not find out gender, but I knew she was a girl from like day one. And I knew her name was going to be Molly Faye from very early on. And so when I gave birth to her and they were like, it's a girl, I'm like, yep, there's Molly. I wasn't surprised. I was completely like, yep, there's my daughter. And it was another instance of the Lord. Yes, thank you, dear. She has a lot of input, always. But it was just, the Lord walked through all of this with me. And I won't lie to you that there were a lot of moments where I felt like I was walking in darkness. But as I look back now, and actually it was really cool writing this talk, as I look back writing this talk and look at everywhere he's led me, like I see so clearly his hand. And it's very hard to see his hand when you're in the middle of something, right? I have a lot of friends who are waiting for different things in their lives, and it's very frustrating, it's very difficult for them, and I keep telling them, like, just wait, because right now it seems like you're kind of fumbling in the dark with your arms out, and you don't know where you're going, and you don't know where he's leading you, but I can promise you I've walked that path, and I'm not at the end of it, because I'm sure there will be more surprises in my life. The Lord never ceases to surprise me. But he's leading you, and he's with you, even when you don't see him or feel him. And so here I am. Molly and James, we didn't do the projector. I was gonna say, I have a cute picture of them because they're cute. Here's my cuties. Seriously, they're both really cute. But they are the biggest blessings in my life. And they are probably the key to my hopeful sainthood one day. And I honestly, truly believe that if you are called to be a mother, or wherever you're called to be in your life, the vocation that God calls you to, he calls you to it because he wants to make you a saint. And I considered myself, and still consider myself, a pretty selfish person. I like to do what I want to do and do it my way, and I think some people can relate to that. But being a mom, you can't be selfish. You just can't. When somebody's crying at 3 in the morning, you can't just be like, nah, I'm gonna go back to sleep. You gotta get up and you gotta comfort them and you gotta feed them or whatever they need. And it just teaches you, it's a really beautiful reflection of the Lord's passion and crucifixion and the way that he died for us. I mean, I'm not saying being a motherhood is like going through a crucifixion, but but the idea of like you love someone so much that you're willing to put your own needs and wants aside for their good, that's being a mom, but that's also what the Lord did for us, right? So here I am, and I think what I've learned through all of this is that I often talk about God as being like the divine author or like the world's greatest writer or whatever you want to call him. But I really do feel like he kind of writes our story, he writes our life, if that makes sense. And I feel like my life has been a lot of me trying to grab the pen out of his hand and write it myself. And I feel like a lot of what he's been teaching me is to stop doing that. But not even just to stop doing that, but to hand him the pen. And trust that the story that he is writing is actually better than I could have ever imagined. And I think that's what I've learned the most out of all of this, is that back when I had these visions of what my future would be like and what my motherhood would be like and what my family would be like, not that those visions weren't good, but I was afraid that in trusting him, that they wouldn't be as good. And instead, what happened is that they were better. His plans are way better than anything you can ever imagine. And as much as I wanted to be a mommy, he didn't let me down, did he? He didn't fail me. It took a long time, and it was a very long and winding road, but it happened. And it happened in a really cool way, and it happened, I mean, I get to be an adoptive mom and a biological mom. That's pretty sweet, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I get to try both cool avenues of motherhood. And I really, it's something that I feel really proud of, and it's a beautiful journey that I've been on to get there. And we'd potentially like to adopt more kids, and we potentially like to have more biological kids, but I've stopped trying to guess what he's going to do, really and truly. Sometimes I catch myself doing like, well, maybe I should start planning, and I'm like, nope, stop. He's not going to listen. He's going to do how he's going to do it if I allow him to do it. And it's hard. It's hard to trust him, and it's scary to trust him because we think that for whatever reason he's not going to give us what we want, or he's going to give us something that's too hard, or he's going to give us something that's too scary or too intense, or that we can't handle, or whatever the case may be, or that we don't want. He doesn't. So I tell you that story not because I think that you guys are going to go through now the rest of your lives never doubting his plans for you, or never being confused or frustrated by anything that he does in your lives, because you probably will, because that's part of being a human, and that's part of trusting in the Lord. But I tell you that story because it's a real obvious example of trusting in the Lord's, sorry, I'm distracted by my daughter. Trusting in the Lord's path for you. And not necessarily trusting that he will do exactly what you want, but trusting that he is good. Because that's really what it is. It's not about predicting the future. It's about trusting that he is a good God, and he's going to give you the desires of your heart, and he's also going to walk with you the entire way. So I know some of you, if we want to relate this back to where you guys are, so some of you may be discerning your vocation, right? Eventually, I mean, not anytime super soon, but your vocation, and not even just your vocation as like a wife or a mother, or if you want to go to religious life, but for your vocation as like what career you want to do one day, right? Some of you might even just be discerning like where I want to go to college, or even like what do I want to be a part of in high school? What activities do I want to do? Those are all discernment processes, big and small, and some of them are bigger than others, or more stressful than others. Some of you might even just be discerning what is the desire of my heart? Like what are the things that I want in this life, and how do I want to live this life? And so I tell you my story because I want to be an example of faith. And I'm not saying I have perfect faith. I told you guys how frustrated I was, and I told you how confused and scared and difficult this was for me, right? It wasn't like a super walk in the park kind of journey. But I tried as best as I could to lean on him and not lean on my own understanding. And that's what he's taught me. He's like, Melissa, your own understanding is great and all, but it's, his ways are above our ways, right? And he's just like, let me show you how good I am, and how gentle I am, and how kind I am, and how much I too want the desires of your heart. So I give you this example as hopefully something to remind you of when you're feeling frustrated or confused or unsure about what his plans for your future are, that the bottom line is just to trust that he is good. And just because it doesn't look like what you think it should look like, or what you want it to look like, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be good. So I can almost promise you without a doubt that it will be. It's, what is it? Is it Romans 8:28? That's all things
work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Rock star you. Yes, all things work together for the good of those who trust, and I'm paraphrasing. You get the gist. But it's true. Everything. And if you had quoted that verse to me, 6 years ago, I would have been like, yep, I believe that. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I would have believed it, but it would have been hard, right? But it's true, and I speak from the other side of that road and telling you that he is good alongside you the whole way. So I think that's